My hands are trembling. The document before me dates back to the 11th century. Its edges are worn, fold marks run deep, the ink has faded, but it's still readable. Written in Greek, Byzantine Greek. The letters are ancient, the paper fragile, but what it says still sends shivers down my spine. By the grace of God and the Emperor's command, the eyes of Crown Prince Alexios shall be pierced with ferrum candens, red-hot iron. Thus he shall be permanently removed from the basileia, from kingship. I am a historian. My name doesn't matter. But I can tell you this. For 15 years I've been studying the dark documents of the Byzantine Empire, from the archives in Istanbul to the secret collections in the Vatican, from monastery libraries in Athens to museums in Thessaloniki. I've traced this empire's footprints everywhere. I've read thousands of pages. I've examined hundreds of decrees, letters, diaries, but this sentence, every time I read it, shakes me to my core. Every single time. Because this isn't an execution order. This is a confession of how a civilization understood power. And that confession was written not in blood, but with eyes. It was midnight. The great palace of Constantinople was silent. In the mosaic-covered corridors, torchlight flickered. On the walls, images of Jesus, the Virgin Mary, and angels gleamed. Gold leaf danced in the crimson light, but that night, those sacred images were merely silent witnesses. In the deepest corner of the palace, in a small room, a young prince waited, Alexios, 18 years old. Dark-haired, dark-eyed, beloved by the people, supported by the army. When he walked the streets, people would bow in greeting. Generals trusted him. Aristocrats praised him, but his brother sat on the throne. And his brother was afraid, because Alexios might one day want the throne. He might rebel. He might gather the army, and he might win. So his brother made a decision. Alexios would not be killed. That would be a sin. Fratricide meant God's curse. Instead, he would be blinded. Because in Byzantium, a blind prince could never become emperor. When the door opened, Alexios stood up. 3 guards entered, dressed in black. Their faces were frozen. He knew them all. They'd been at the palace for years. But tonight, they were not friends. They were executioners. "My prince," said the first one, his voice trembling. "You need to lie down on the bed." Alexios didn't answer. He just looked. His eyes were bright. He wanted to see one last time everything. The walls, the ceiling, the lamp, the guards' faces. Then he slowly lay down. He placed his hands at his sides. He held his breath. And closed his eyes. Write in the comments, from which city are you watching this story? And do you think harming the body for power can ever be legitimate? In the Byzantine Empire, rulership was determined not by blood, but by body. This is crucial. If you don't understand this point, you won't understand the practice of blinding either. In medieval Europe, when a king died, his son would ascend to the throne. First son, second son. The order was clear. Blood ties were everything. But in Byzantium it was different. In Byzantium, rulership was a matter of the body. To become emperor, it wasn't enough to come from the right family. Your body also had to be perfect. Physical deficiency was political deficiency. Disability meant unworthiness for the throne. And blindness. Blindness was the greatest deficiency. I have a legal text from the 8th century called ekloga. The emperor must be physically complete. He cannot have a missing arm, a lame leg, or blind eyes, because the emperor is God's image, and the image must be perfect. This isn't just law, it's a worldview. Byzantines believed that power lived in the body. Eyes were the symbol of power. Surveillance, control, knowledge, all happened through the eyes. A blind emperor couldn't see his people, couldn't see his enemies, couldn't see conspiracies. That's why a blind emperor couldn't be emperor. The first blinding case occurred in 695. That year, Emperor Justinian II sat on the throne. He was a powerful man, but also cruel and capricious. The people didn't love him. The aristocrats feared him. General Leontios staged a coup. He stormed the palace. He captured Justinian. Now what would he do? He could kill him. It was easy, fast, but he was a smart man. He knew that killing an emperor was dangerous. The people might revolt, the army might rebel, the church might curse, but blinding him, that was different. A blind emperor was no longer an emperor. Legally, politically, symbolically. And Leontios did exactly that. They took Justinian to a dark room in the palace. They laid him on the ground. They held his arms. They gripped his head. They brought the red-hot iron. It had been heated in the fire. The tip was bright red. They drove it into his eyes. First eye, then second eye, Justinian screamed. A terrible scream. It hit the walls, echoed through the corridors. Then they cut his nose. This was called rhinocopia. Another mutilation, another mark. Then they sent him into exile, to Crimea, to the farthest corner of the empire. But Justinian returned, 10 years later. A man who had been blinded, his nose cut off, sent into exile, came back and reclaimed his throne. During his exile, he didn't give up. He made plans. He gathered allies. He made deals with the Khazars. He formed alliances with the Bulgarians. He gave money, made promises, raised an army. In 705, one night, he reached the walls of Constantinople. The people were shocked. The church was uncertain, but Justinian did something clever. He attached a golden nose to his face, skillfully crafted, shining. He covered his eyes with wax. He didn't hide that he couldn't see, he showed it. And he told the people, I am still your emperor, because blood ties are stronger than the body. They blinded me, cut my nose, sent me into exile. But I have returned, and the people believed, and Justinian sat on the throne again. Blind, but as emperor. This story teaches me something. Power is built with the body, but resistance is also made with the body. You can wound the body, but you cannot kill the soul. You cannot break the will. You cannot destroy determination. If you like the video, please like it. If you follow, I'll share more dark history stories. Year 799, Emperor Constantine VI. He was a very young emperor, 26 years old, but the real power was with his mother, Empress Irene. Irene ruled through her son. She made the decisions. She wrote the laws. She appointed the generals. Constantine was just a puppet, but Constantine grew up. He matured. He gained strength. One day he said, enough. I am the emperor. I should rule. Step aside, mother. When Irene heard this, she made a cold decision. She wouldn't kill her son, because he was her own child, but she would blind him. That night, guards entered Constantine's room. Constantine screamed. He struggled. He called for help. Mother, don't do this to me. But no one came, because everyone feared Irene. The guards laid him on the ground. They held his arms. They gripped his head. They brought the red-hot iron. They forced his eyelids open, and they drove the iron directly into his eyes. Scream, smoke, blood, and then silence. Constantine could no longer see. He was no longer emperor. The next day, Irene went to the palace balcony. The crowd gathered. They filled the square. Where is Constantine? What happened to the emperor? Irene, in a cold voice, said, my son can no longer rule because God has deprived him of sight. This was God's will. The crowd remained silent. The church remained silent. No one objected, because everyone knew a blind prince is deprived of the throne. Write in the comments, can a mother do this to her own child for power? Do you think Irene was a monster or a pragmatic leader? In the 10th century, General Bardas Phokas rebelled. He was a powerful man. He came from a noble family. He had an army. He had popular support. Emperor Basil II had to stop him. They fought. Bardas lost. He was captured. Basil offered him a choice, death or blindness. Bardas thought for a long time. Then he answered, blindness. Why? Because he knew death is an end. Certain, undeniable, but blindness is a living death. After Bardas's eyes were blinded, he was sent to a monastery. There he spent the rest of his life, silently, never speaking. The monks would observe him. Calm, they'd say. He never makes a sound. But some nights a monk heard him crying. I want to see, Bardas would say quietly to himself. Just one more time to see the sun, the sky, but he never could, because his eyes no longer existed. 10th century. Historian Michael Sellos wrote in his memoirs, "Blinding has become so common that it's almost a ritual at the palace. Every new emperor either kills or blinds his rivals." Sellos himself witnessed many of these punishments. Once he watched the blinding of a young prince. Then he wrote, "His screams hit the stone walls. Blood flowed onto the floor. And I stood there unable to do anything, because this was the law." In 1071, Romanos IV Diogenes was defeated at the Battle of Manzikert against the Seljuk Turks. It was a great defeat. When he returned, he was deposed. Michael VII came to power instead. Romanos was still seen as a threat. He still had supporters, so Michael made a decision. Romanos would be blinded. Romanos's blinding caused great shock among the people, because Romanos was a beloved emperor. He was brave, honest, a warrior. Even the church was disturbed. The patriarch wrote to Michael, "This punishment is too cruel, unacceptable in God's eyes," but Michael didn't listen. Romanos was blinded and sent into exile to the island of Prote, alone, abandoned. There, a few months later, he died from infection, in pain, in darkness. By the 12th century, blinding became less common, because now there were other methods. Poison, fast, silent, accident. He fell, he died. No one questions it. Prison, lock him in a tower, throw away the key. Blinding was now old-fashioned. But in 1195, Emperor Isaac II Angelus was blinded by his brother Alexios. He was thrown into a dungeon. He remained in darkness for 8 years, alone, forgotten. The dungeon was cold, damp. Sunlight never entered. In 1203, the Fourth Crusade arrived. Isaac's son made a deal with the Crusaders. "Save my father, I'll give you money." The Crusaders agreed. They besieged Constantinople. Isaac was released from the dungeon. 8 years later, blind, weak, sick, but he became emperor again. When he sat on the throne, the people were shocked. A blind emperor. For the first time in history. Against the laws, but Isaac didn't care. "I have no eyes," he said, "but I can still think. I can still rule. I can still provide justice." He ruled for a year. It was a difficult year. The Crusaders were pressuring him. The treasury was empty, but Isaac did what he could. Then he died. From old age. From exhaustion. But before he died, he proved something. Blindness cannot take power. It only takes eyes. In 1453, Constantinople fell. The Ottoman Empire took the city. The Byzantine Empire passed into history. And the tradition of blinding ended. But a legacy remained. For hundreds of years, hundreds of princes had been blinded. Their stories were written in chronicles. But their names were mostly forgotten. They were simply called blind princes. Nameless, silent, in darkness. I want to remember them. Alexios, Constantine, Bardas, Romanos, Isaac, and so many more. To tell their stories is to give them a voice. Their voice lost in darkness. Byzantium's tradition of blinding was a symbol not only of cruelty, but of power. Every prince whose eyes were taken was punished with his body, but lived on through his story, because some things are seen not with eyes but with memory. And history forgives not those who forget, but those who remember. But let's also not forget this. Justinian returned. Isaac sat on the throne again, and this teaches us, you can wound the body, but you cannot kill the soul. You can take the eyes, but you cannot steal hope. You can take power from their hands, but not the right to resist. If this story moved you, please like and follow. Write in the comments, which dark history story would you like to hear? Which forgotten voice would you like me to amplify? Because I am a historian. My duty is to remind the forgotten, to bring those who remain in darkness into the light, to carry history's silent screams to you. See you in the next video. Don't forget history, because history is not just the past. History is the mirror of today and the warning of tomorrow.